Hey everybody, welcome to Get Ready With Me and Talk About Stuff. My name is Stephanie, and this is the show where, as you might have figured out, I get ready with you and talk about things. And I haven't done this show regularly for a little bit, but I did decide to do a few episodes during spooky season, and each of the topics covered during these episodes are topics that were suggested to me by a viewer/listener, and topics that I stumbled upon while researching the topics that were suggested. So it's been a very interesting few weeks of research and watching documentaries and so forth. And I just want to say thank you to those of you who did suggest topics, because it's been fun to dive into those rabbit holes and just see what I can find. This week, we are talking about the Honey Island Swamp Monster. And that was really a lot of fun, because there's actually a fair bit of interesting information, I'll put it that way, interesting information about this particular cryptid. And I've had a lot of fun looking into it, so, and we're going to get into what I found in just a moment. But if you'd like to support me or support future shows, you can do that by shopping my Etsy store. Now, I do want to say this about my Etsy store. It is acting up. It's being very wonky, and I have not had the time to get on the phone or sit in a chat with somebody from Etsy to figure out what's wrong. So if you do see something in my Etsy shop, and I've linked it in the description, if you see something in there that you like and you'd like to purchase it, you can do that. You just have to message me, and then we can arrange for purchase outside of Etsy. So that's what I've been doing, for the time being concerning those items, and I might be doing that for a bit longer. I'm trying to get things coordinated so people's holiday shopping is easier, but technology and whatnot. Anyway, so today we are talking about the Honey Island Swamp Monster. And again, this was a topic that was suggested to me, and one I've had tremendous fun learning about. There are a lot of things out there covering this, and most of the coverage, it involves at least the granddaughter of one of the people who had the first documented sighting of this creature. So let's talk a little bit about what the Honey Island Swamp Monster is. So the Honey Island Swamp Monster, he is also known as the Cajun Sasquatch, or in Cajun French, and I'm going to do my very best here, my deepest apologies to people who speak Cajun French, because I can guarantee you I am not going to get this right, but I'm going to try, okay? It is La Bête Noire. And he is an ape-like humanoid cryptic creature. He is similar to Bigfoot in that he is, as I said, ape-like. He's bipedal. Well, Bigfoot doesn't, but the Honey Island Swamp Monster inhabits the Honey Island Swamp, which is in St. Tammany Parish in Louisiana. And he has become a part of Louisiana folklore to the degree that there are actual swamp tours you can take that will take you out there, perhaps in hopes of a sighting for this swamp monster. People have really learned how to capitalize on this alleged existence of said monster. So good for them. That's what we do. We capitalize on these things and make ourselves a comfortable living. So scientists, being scientists, they have said that its existence is unlikely, but what do they know? So let's get further into his description. He is commonly described as a large bipedal humanoid creature. He stands about 7 feet tall, which is pretty dang tall. And he is covered with gray hair. Now, unlike Bigfoot, who is covered with, he's got shorter brown hair, brown or black hair. The Honey Island Swamp Monster has longer hair, and it is gray or gray-black. He is not brown like his, perhaps, cousin. So that sets him apart a little bit. He also is said to have yellow or red eyes, and he is also accompanied by an absolutely putrid smell. Like, it's been described as the dead, like he smells like the decaying flesh of a dead animal. And that's not the first time I've heard this regarding these cryptids. I mean, that actually seems to be a fairly common feature of any cryptid, is that they just have this horrible, horrible smell. I don't know why that is. We could theorize all day, but I don't know why that is. And I'm not going to get into the theories. I do have them, but that's not what we're here to discuss today. So other names for the Honey Island swamp monster are the Rougarou, and there is actually a festival for the Rougarou every year. And I would imagine it's kind of like the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where it's not necessarily saying everybody believes it's real, but it is a fun excuse to get together, have a good time, and tell scary stories, I guess. He is also known as the Louisiana Wookiee, or simply the Thing. Do you have a preferred name for him? I'm curious to know. There have been plaster casts made of footprints, and we'll get more into that in a few minutes. One of the things that's noted about these footprints, though, is that they have 4 toes, which is different from Bigfoot, or any primate for that matter, because primates and Bigfoot have 5 toes. So he is similar to Bigfoot, but he is also different. Now, the history of the Honey Island swamp monster is interesting in and of itself. So he was the first documented sighting, and I think that's important, because just because it's the first documented sighting does not mean it's the first time anybody's seen him. But the first documented sighting happened in 1963, and Harlan Ford and his friend Billy Mills were out, I believe they were hunting, and they came upon this creature, or not came upon him, I guess he was off in the distance, and sorry, they were just like, what the heck is that? So it would be easy to dismiss, what happened as like a mistaken identity. You know, they think they saw something, but what they were really seeing was actually something quite ordinary, something that is in the swamp, that is known to be in the swamp, and they made a big deal out of nothing. Certainly that is a possibility. However, Harlan Ford was a retired air traffic controller who took up wildlife photography in his retirement. And he is the type of guy who was pretty no nonsense. He, of all people, he would have had the least interest in drawing attention to himself for, speculation about a cryptid. He just would not do that. He did not want to lose, as most people don't. They don't want to lose the respect of their friends, their family, their colleagues. They're not going to put themselves on the line like that. So for somebody as no nonsense as Harlan Ford to say, I saw something, it was not like anything I've seen before, I know it sounds crazy, but this is what I saw, and to stick to that story is rather remarkable. So that happened in 1963, and then in 1974, Harlan Ford and his friend Billy Mills, they claimed to have found unusual footprints in an area near the body of a wild boar whose throat had been gashed, but the wild boar was not eaten, which is very unusual. I mean, typically, if a predatory animal kills its prey, it's with the intention to eat it. But instead, this animal was just left there, and they found these strange footprints surrounding leading away, I guess, from the animal. And I think this was the time when maybe they spotted, they were armed, and they were asked at one point, or Harlan Ford, I should say, was asked at one point, why didn't you shoot it? And his answer was he couldn't, because this creature just looked too human. He felt it would not be right to shoot this creature that was so human-like, which is interesting. And he also, over the years, didn't talk a lot about it, not because he was afraid of having what he was saying disproved, but he was also concerned that people were going to hunt this creature and try to kill it. And we know that that can happen because, you know, there are still anomalies that occur in nature all the time, and it's not unusual for those things to be kept quiet because they're worried that somebody is going to go hunting for it to take as a trophy. I remember a few years ago hearing about an albino deer, and there was genuine concern that if people knew exactly where this deer was spotted, they would go there and set up a tree stand and wait for this deer to come along and then shoot it so they could take the trophy. So the concern that somebody would hunt the swamp monster, I think, was a very well-founded concern, and I can certainly understand why somebody who wanted to protect this creature would choose to simply not talk about it. Not because he didn't feel that what he saw he could, you know, credibly attest to, but just to protect the creature. However, in 1980, after Harlan Ford passed away, his wife Yvonne, while going through his things, found several 8mm films that showed this creature. Now, obviously, it's not like the creature just walked up and was like, hey, hello, you want to get a picture of me? Not at all. I mean, these were sightings that happened, you know, through trees and through, you know, they were at a distance, basically. And certainly somebody could look at that and suggest that maybe it was all staged. But again, this is coming from a man who really had a lot to lose if he were to start, you know, sharing stories about a creature that basically existed only in his mind. So I think it's always important to look at the not necessarily the credentials of the people who are sharing these things, but what do they stand to lose if they were to share about something that wasn't real? You know, if they were to share something that they know makes them sound, you know, absolutely crazy, but they're willing to share that story anyway, because I think that really says a lot. And in every story I've looked into regarding cryptids, I've come across that. People who have a lot to lose by sharing their story and sticking to it, refusing to really care much about what people think, and even as it began costing them perhaps relationships, professional opportunities, whatever the case may be, they didn't waver. And I think that speaks volumes as to the credibility of these stories, not just about the Honey Island swamp monster, but about so many other cryptids I've read about. If somebody is willing to, you know, stick by that story and give everything for it, at the very least, you know, they believe it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. People do die for lies, but what it means is they believe it's true, and that's relevant. The Honey Island swamp monster is still said to inhabit the swamps and bayous along the Pearl River, and that's its primary place of residence, I guess we'll say. So the Pearl River is a river that actually runs along the border between Louisiana and Missouri. And that is relevant, and I'm going to tell you why in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about some theories regarding where this creature came from, because the theories are rather interesting. And I also want to say I might not have had all the details exactly right regarding what happened during the sightings, because, you know, it was hard for me because I've got so many other things going on to get to pin down all the details. I just didn't have time to dive in so deeply that I could get it 100% correct. So I apologize if I got a couple of the details wrong, but the general gist of it is they saw something, it looked human. They couldn't kill it because it looked so human, and they didn't share that knowledge with a lot of people because they didn't want it being hunted. So there's that. Okay, so as for the origins, there was a train that crashed near the Honey Island Swamp, and this train was actually carrying a circus. It was traveling to its next destination. It crashed. Now the belief is that the swamp monster he's actually a descendant of chimpanzees that escaped the circus train and ran into the swamp and just they adapted. They learned how to live there. Now, perhaps, I guess that's plausible. Chimps are very smart. They could, I would think that, they could adapt fairly quickly, to learning how to live in a swamp, I would think. But I'm not an expert, so I don't know. You can't hold me to that. But even more out there is the theory that the Honey Island Swamp Monster is a creature that was born from chimps breeding with alligators. Now that is just wild to me. I don't think that would even be possible. They are two completely different kinds of animals. I don't think that they would ever mate in the first place, and if they did, I don't think any offspring would result from it, because how could that even happen? It seems to me like an alligator would look at a chimp and say, "Oh, there's a snack," and not like in the cool way or the flattering way, but the "I'm going to eat you" kind of way. Like, I'm going to eat you and digest you, and you're just going to become part of the swamp. So that is just a wild idea. But there are people who would say that at the very least the theory holds water in that there have been some sightings of chimps in the swamp. I watched a documentary last night. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's called Boogeymen, Monsters Among Us, and it is available on Amazon Prime free with commercials. So I gave that a look yesterday, and there was a man who was interviewed who said that he recalled hearing stories from his neighbors regarding going out hunting and shooting what they thought was, a squirrel or something up in a tree, and then the thing fell after being shot, and lo and behold, it was a chimp. Now you could argue, how do you get a chimp and a squirrel confused? Then you have to consider how densely forested, I guess you could say, the swamp is. Like, I guess that's probably not the right term, but the Honey Island Swamp is probably one of the most pristine swamps in the United States. It is as it has always been. It has not been interfered with much as far as development goes. There are people who live there, but it's very sparsely populated, and the people who live there tend to live along the ridge of the swamp, not in down in the swamp itself. That being said, there are also people who have cabins that are down in the swamp, but even those are very, very few. So the Honey Island Swamp is pristine. It belongs to nature, and it is, the trees are very thick through there. It would be, from what I have seen, it would be very easy to mistake this creature. If you see it, what you think is a squirrel in a tree, and you shoot it, to me, it seems like it would be fairly easy to see something up in a tree, assume it's a squirrel, and then be utterly confused when a chimpanzee drops from the tree. One thing I know for sure is that if I was lost in Honey Island Swamp, I would die. That's what I know for sure, because the vegetation, that's what I was looking for. The vegetation there is so thick, and there are so very many ways to die there. And I have no expertise whatsoever regarding swamps. I have absolute certainty I would die. But the people who are claiming to have seen this creature are people who have lived in the swamp their whole lives. They are familiar with the swamp. They are familiar with the animals who live there. These are not people who are new to it and are just confused by what they've seen because they've never seen animals, swamp animals before. These are people who know what, again, the common phrase, as I've said in other videos, I know what I saw. And it's very easy to, I think, dismiss people when they're talking about something that, we might think is outlandish, but for somebody who's lived in or very near Honey Island Swamp their whole lives and they're familiar with the wildlife there, if they're saying they saw something they could not explain, I'm gonna tend to believe them, because it's not as if telling these stories has made them a ton of money or given them a stellar reputation. It's more likely that they have lost opportunities because of saying that they've seen this creature, and they are unwavering in their conviction that what they saw was in fact a monster. And it's more likely that people would be leery of them than they would be enthusiastically supporting their claim that there is a monster in the swamp. Now, as I was doing my research, one thing I came across is the fact that while Honey Island Swamp is populated with good people, salt of the earth type of people, as far as I can tell, honest, hardworking, just really good people, there are also, maybe not now, but at one time, there was also an attraction for, let's say, the criminal element. And the reason for that being, as I mentioned, the Pearl River runs between, it creates the border between Louisiana and Missouri, okay? Or Mississippi, not Missouri, Mississippi. Sorry about that. I was like, I gotta remember to say Mississippi, not Missouri. But again, I did it wrong, so I'm sorry. So Louisiana and Mississippi, they're separated by the Pearl River. And what that meant was, if somebody was running from the law in Mississippi, they could cross the Pearl River, go into the swamp. That would mean the Mississippi authorities could do nothing. They could, if the people were on the Louisiana side of the border, which is where the swamp is, and if you knew enough, if you had good survival skills, you could actually live in the swamp for a very long time. And because it is so densely, there's such dense vegetation there, and because it is so easy to get lost in the swamp if you're not familiar with it, if you knew what you were doing, you would probably live there comfortably for a very long time. There's plenty to eat. If you are a good survivalist, you can keep yourself out of harm's way, and it would be easy to hide out there. So the swamp itself has a long reputation for being, I wouldn't say shady, but definitely attracting an element that the other people who are living in and around the swamp would probably prefer not be part of their little community. But that was not to be the case. So it provides an excellent hideout for criminals. And in fact, in 1926, a murder would take place in Honey Island Swamp that would really bring to light how prominently appealing the Honey Island Swamp would be to people who were just looking for a way to hide from the authorities. And I'm going to tell you about that when I come back, because we are once again at the point where I need to focus, and I can't focus on my eye makeup and speak intelligently to you at the same time. So I'm going to pause, and when I come back, you'll get to see the finished product, and we are going to talk about the murder that happened in 1926 that brought Honey Island Swamp the attention of local, state, and federal authorities. So hang on, it's gonna get interesting. Okay, I'm back, and here is my look for the day, or at least for the next several minutes. I actually wore this to work yesterday because I work at a very cool place that they allowed me to dress up every time I worked in October, which was so much fun. And this is what I wore to work yesterday. My intention had been to record this video yesterday, but it didn't quite work out. But before I took a break, I mentioned that there was a murder most foul, that happened that really put Honey Island Swamp on the map as far as crime goes anyway. Let's dive into that, because I think it's an interesting story, and it also kind of helps illustrate just how easy it is for things to be happening in Honey Island Swamp and people have no idea about it. So on December 23rd, 1926, two USDA entomologists went into Honey Island Swamp on the Louisiana side with the intention of going hunting. Now, they had been warned that, at least at the time, there were a lot of questionable people who who were living in the swamp because they were hiding from authorities, and it probably wasn't a good idea to go hunting in there. Perhaps especially because these were men who were working for the government, and people who were hiding in the swamp were trying to hide from people working in the government. So it might not have been the best idea to go in there. But these men just said, you know what? I think that we're going to be just fine, and we're going to go and hunt at Honey Island Swamp. So the men parked, as I said, they were on the Louisiana side of the Pearl River, and they parked their truck because they found a nice little abandoned shack of some kind, and they thought, hey, that would be a good place to kind of set up as our base. So they parked, they started unloading their things, carrying it to the shack, and then coming back for another load. And as this was happening, all of a sudden, one of the men was shot. William Mingy, I think is how his name is pronounced. And it was William Mingy and John McLemore, and John McLemore was shot, fell to the ground immediately, dead. And having heard the shot, his hunting partner, William Mingy, he went rushing over to John, like, what on earth happened? It was all just so sudden and just seemingly out of nowhere. He went to see what happened to his friend, and then he was shot, and he too fell to the ground dead. Whoever shot them proceeded to take their truck and get out of the area. Now, keep in mind, these were two men who worked for the government. So when it was time for them to return to work, it became apparent that something was not right. They were several days past when they should have been returning from their hunting trip, and their boss, I guess, a Mr. Wright, he decided, you know what, something's not right here. These men should have been back by now. I'm going to head up a search party, and we're going to go look for them. And lo and behold, the men's bodies were discovered. And in addition to having, to the men being dead, the truck is missing. There were personal items that were also taken, and these are going to come into play later. So Mr. Mingy's heavy coat and high-top boots had been taken. And Mr. McLemore's automatic pistol and gold watch had been taken. The people of, upon hearing about the deaths of these USDA people, the people of Picayune were very upset because these men, Mr. Mingy and Mr. McLemore, were actually, basically a friend to the community. They had helped the local farmers rid their farms of pestilence that were killing their crops. These were men who were well respected by the people in the community near Honey Island Swamp. And so when people heard that they had been murdered, They were upset and they were demanding justice. Now, there was immediately one suspect that came to mind when when people heard of the murders, and that was a man named Mr. Doc Jackson, and he lived in Honey Island Swamp, and he had a reputation for being a terrible person. Basically, that's what he was known for. He was a horrible person. Now, he was the type of man that if you crossed him, you were going to be made to pay. He did not overlook even the smallest of slights. And he had a quick temper. So if someone upset him, they could guarantee that at some point he was going to retaliate. A couple of examples are, at one point, after visiting a widow named Mrs. Emmeline Pearson, yes, Ms. Emmeline Pearson, her body was found in her home. She had been shot dead in her home. Now, when he was questioned, Doc Jackson said, well, that's, here's what happened. There was a pistol on the table, it fell, and when it fell, it just happened to go off and shoot her right in the heart. How crazy is that? And then another instance of many, a man named Henry Bennett had been killed mysteriously as he drove along Pearl River Road, and Doc Jackson was seen in the area, and he was, of course, the prime suspect, but again, he denied all involvement, and apparently there was not enough evidence to convict. I mean, I don't know that he was ever even arrested for that. So this is a man who just had, if there was anybody in Honey Island Swamp who was going to kill 2 USDA agents, it was going to be that guy. So he was wanted by the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff anyway for any number of other things he'd been doing. And then with this additional, with the murder of these 2 men, the sheriff launched a search party of his own to find him, and they had no success. So there was evidence, though, that the murderer, whoever it might be, had fled into Hancock County. And that meant that the sheriff of Hancock County, Joe, I'm going to try this, I don't know if I'm doing it right, Bontemps? He also formed a search party to find Doc Jackson. But again, it was very, very easy to hide in Honey Island Swamp. Because if you don't know the swamp, you could very easily get turned around and get lost. And there was the dense vegetation. There were alligators in there. There were venomous snakes. I mean, all kinds of things that could kill you, which meant it's very easy, if you know your way around the swamp, to hide in there from people who don't know their way around the swamp. Nevertheless, there were search parties out there looking for Doc Jackson, and also gladly accepting any information they could find regarding his whereabouts. So at this point, you have state authorities involved, you have local authorities involved, and then the FBI also joins the search because these were government agents that were killed. So Mr. E.L. Osborne and Mr. E.P. Ames joined the search, and in the process of their search, they found a truck in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And that truck was found by an officer named J.E. Wassengale. My apologies for butchering these names. I'm really doing my best here. So upon learning that this truck had been found, the FBI agents went to Mississippi to question the officer who had found the truck. And the officer said that a man with long black hair and wearing a mackinaw, which is a heavy coat, and knee-high boots had stopped him to ask for directions. Later, this officer found the truck the man had been driving left off by the side of the road. So in the bed of the truck, the agents found a pistol that had been wrapped in a burlap sack and hidden, and it turned out that it was Mr. McLemore's. Now, a man named Jesse Favre, I believe is how that's pronounced, was suspected when the shotgun shells that were found in his hotel room matched the shotgun shells that had been found near the bodies of the murdered USDA agents. So the Sheriff Bontemps ordered Deputy Albert Smith to form a posse and search Honey Island Swamp and find Mr. Favre. Now, as I mentioned, Honey Island Swamp, for all its notoriety for unwittingly harboring a criminal element, had a lot of good, honest people that lived there as well. And these people were more than happy to tell the authorities where Jesse Favre's cabin was. So a search of the cabin yielded not only shotgun shells and so forth, but it also had Mr. Mingy's gold watch, which Favre would tell the investigators he received from none other than Doc Jackson. Doc Jackson had given him these things in exchange for hiding the truck, which is how the truck ended up left off by the side of a road in Mississippi. So local residents believed the physical description fit both men well enough that they were actually calling for the lynching of one or both of these men. And because there was so much danger present for Jesse Favre, like if they had put him in county jail, no problem at all, a mob would have come in, given him an early release, I guess you could say, and lynched him. That was a given. So he was actually whisked away to New Orleans, where he was kept safely until his trial. In 1927, he was tried and convicted for the murder of the USDA agents. And after he was convicted, he said, "Yep, I did that, but I didn't do it alone, and Mr. Doc Jackson was with me and participated in the killings." So previously he'd been saying, nope, it was all Doc, and I had nothing to do with it, except he gave me these things to hide the truck. Now he's singing a different song. So he admitted to killing the men, confirmed the suspicion that Doc Jackson was involved, at which point the sheriffs, obviously wanted to arrest Doc Jackson on suspicions of murder. So he was found, he was arrested, he was put in the county jail. And I'm wondering if that was a misstep on the part of the police, or if that was intentional, given what followed. Of course, as you would expect, a mob of about 100 men showed up at the county jail. They used a specific type of torch to get through the bars of the jail cell, and they dragged Doc Jackson right out of there. The men who took him prisoner threatened to kill him at a bridge near the site of the murders. As they're progressing to that bridge, a farmer intercepts them and says, "Listen, the authorities know what you've done. They are on their way here." And at that point, the people said, "Well, you know what? We're not going to let the authorities derail our plans for what they consider justice for Doc Jackson." And they decided they were going to lynch him right where they were at the Bogue Cheeto Bridge. Again, my most humble apologies. I'm probably not saying any of this right. So he was dragged to the banister of the bridge. A rope was put around his neck. And at that point, he was pushed off the railings and hung from the bridge. Now, Sheriff Joe Bontemps and his deputies did arrive on the scene, but they arrived too late, and they found Jackson's body hanging from the makeshift gallows. So that's why I wonder if the authorities put him in jail knowing what would happen, and just decided to save themselves the trouble of a trial, the expense, the aggravation, and just decided to let, vigilante justice do their job for them. So that, spells out pretty clearly that Honey Island Swamp is no stranger to mystery. It is no stranger to having some questionable characters, you know, living in there, and people obviously would have a hard time finding. I mean, I put a lot of links in the description, and if you've never looked at Honey Island Swamp, I encourage you to click on those links, watch videos, whatever, and get a real sense of how dense the vegetation is there, how dangerous it would be to be in there if you do not know your way around the swamp, and how easy it would be for something to be in that swamp and nobody is aware of it except for the occasional glimpse now and then. So now, as I mentioned earlier, scientists have said it's extremely unlikely that the Honey Island Swamp Monster even exists. I don't necessarily find that plausible, but hey, Jaden, can you get that, please? Sorry. There's plenty there to eat. Something that lives there could live there comfortably for a long time, if they know what they're doing. And certainly a creature that inhabits the swamp would know how to survive. So I don't know. Does the reputation of Honey Island Swamp lend itself to the creation and retelling of these stories? I think it does. I think that the Honey Island Swamp is probably the home of many legends over the years. And it would be, I think, easy to create a story, retell the story, give it credibility just because of where it's taking place. And I'm also left with the question that, you know, do we sometimes manifest these things because we want them to be real? I don't know. What I do know is that, and if you've watched me before or listened to me before, one thing we do not do on this channel is dismiss people's lived experiences. And there are many people within the Honey Island Swamp region who have said they saw something that, despite having grown up in or near Honey Island Swamp, they had never seen this creature before. They didn't know what it was. They will not be dissuaded from saying it was a bipedal, humanoid creature with long, matted gray hair all over its body. It smelled like decaying flesh. It smelled disgusting. I will never forget what I saw and what I smelled, and they will not be swayed. So, based on that, I mean, what do you think? I think we have to defer to the people who have had these experiences, because I wasn't there with them. I don't know what they saw or didn't see. And I don't know the swamp. I don't know. I know that I would never survive in that swamp. And I know that there are probably creatures living in that swamp that I would not be able to identify. And if I can't identify them, and somebody who was born and raised in the swamp cannot identify them, and scientists are simply assuming that this creature could not exist, I don't know, it begs the question of maybe. I think it's easy to dismiss people, you know, who are stereotypically seen as less educated, you know, these hillbillies and whatnot. Somebody's in the kitchen behind me. Sorry about that. But I don't think that...
It's all right. I'm just getting hot dogs.
Okay, that's great. You didn't need to do it right this second, though. Anyway, so I don't think it's okay to dismiss them just because they're, quote, swamp people. Just like I don't think it's okay to dismiss people because they're, quote, hillbillies or whatever derisive term you might want to use to describe them. I think we have to defer to their lived experience. Now, the Honey Island Swamp Monster has made its way into various pop culture phenomena, I guess. So, as I mentioned last night, I watched an episode of Boogeymen, Monsters Among Us, and they covered the Honey Island Swamp Monster. They actually interviewed Dana Holyfield, who is the granddaughter of Harlan Ford, who was one of the first to report sightings of this monster. And they also interviewed other people who grew up in the Honey Island Swamp and still live there to this day and have seen it. And they also interviewed people who are skeptical, who also were born and raised in the swamp and have they believe that the evidence is less than credible to prove the existence of this monster. So that's a really interesting one. The Honey Island Swamp Monster is also covered in an episode of In Search Of, and I've left the link for that in the description. Very interesting, and I think that if you like the weird, then you might really enjoy this episode. And then, of course, there's the show Fact or Faked, Paranormal Files. They looked at the 8mm film, and what they concluded was they could recreate what was happening in the film by having someone dress in a ghillie suit and go, stomping through the swamp. That has also been said regarding the probably the most famous footage of Bigfoot that exists, that it could just be a man in a ghillie suit. However, they also said they cannot dismiss entirely the idea that this creature might be real, because a creature like that would be able to thrive quite nicely in a swamp. There's plenty to eat, and why go anywhere else? Let's just stay near the Pearl River, where we're doing just fine, and these people sometimes come out looking for us, but we know how to hide. I mean, that's what I would do anyway. But I'm not a swamp monster. Or am I? In 2019, an episode of America Unearthed titled Bigfoot in the Bayou investigated the possible sightings, and presenter Scott Walter concluded the smell accompanying the sightings was most likely methane produced by decomposing plants. But again, I think that dismisses people's lived experiences. These people living in the swamp certainly saw something they could not identify. And again, those who have been eyewitnesses to the presence of this monster say, I know what I saw. So I'm going to leave it to you. What do you think? Do you think that the Honey Island Swamp Monster and similar monsters, because there are reported sightings all over the country, all over the world, of monsters that are similar to this, do you think that it's real? Or do you think it's become so deeply ingrained in the local lore of Honey Island Swamp that people think they're seeing this monster, but they're actually seeing something else? Do you think we manifest these things because so many of us want so much to believe that these things could be out there, that in some way we are manifesting them? What do you think? I'm curious to know, because I think it's fascinating. I think that it is the height of arrogance to assume that we know more than someone's lived experience, that our speculation outweighs what they know what they saw. They know what they smelled. So I don't know. I just think it's pretty arrogant to think that, we've discovered all there is to discover about this world, and there's no way that those creatures could exist, because we personally have not seen them, and we personally haven't seen conclusive scientific evidence to prove that they exist. So what are your thoughts? I really want to know. I apologize for the way I stumbled through this for the last couple weeks. Well, as usual, I haven't been feeling the greatest, and it really impacted my ability to research this as thoroughly and for things to flow as smoothly as I would like them to. And my apologies for that, but I hope you still enjoyed the show. I really wanted to get this done before the end of spooky season. I have one more podcast I'm going to do on Monday, if not tomorrow, but probably Monday. And it is going to be very good. I think you'll enjoy it, so I hope you'll tune in. I hope you tune in. Anyway, have a great day. Thanks for being here. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Don't shit on yourself or anyone else, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.